The boyfriend, Aaron Wright, felt like she would not submit to him as his girlfriend, and because of that, he wanted to teach her a lesson. The friend was actually helping position the female and turn her and contort her body into certain positions so the boyfriend could beat her in those areas of her body.
Would you say a police baton?
We believe so. It was not recovered on the scene, but we believe it was some type of police baton.
An 8-year-old girl was pulled out of sleep one morning by a sound coming from the kitchen. She got up to see what it was. There, she found a woman stripped naked, handcuffed, bent face down over a weight bench. Her father and his best friend were taking turns beating her with a police baton. But the thing is, this little girl had seen this before. She wasn't surprised, so she turned away, walked to the fridge, and poured herself a bowl of cereal. By the end of that morning, the woman was dead. Her name was Joyce Quaweay. She was 24 years old, and the men who beat her weren't strangers. One was her boyfriend. He used to wear a badge, the other still did. Welcome to Crime Connect. Today's episode is all about Joyce Quaweay. If something in your life feels normal but shouldn't, that's not strength, that's a warning sign. Before we go further, hit the subscribe button now so you don't miss out on next episodes. Let me tell you about the house on Green Street. 2 men lived there. Their names were Aaron Wright and Marquis Robinson, and they had been best friends for years. Wright joined the Temple University police force back in 1989. Robinson followed years later, in 2006. But by the summer of 2016, only one of them still had that job. Wright had left the force back in 2012. To this day, nobody outside the department knows exactly why he left. Robinson, though, was still an active officer. Right up until the day everything changed. Now, these 2 men didn't live alone. Wright lived in that house with his girlfriend Joyce and their 2 little daughters, still babies. Robinson lived there too, with his own girlfriend, a woman whose name was never made public. And some nights, 2 more children stayed over, Wright's daughters, from an earlier relationship. On those nights, there could be 4 adults and 4 children under one roof. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary, crowded family home. But inside, fear was just part of the furniture. It ran on rules, small rules, the kind most households wouldn't think twice about. Dishes had to be washed a certain way. Napkins couldn't be left on the counter. Bags had to be packed properly for school. But in this house, those weren't just chores. They were tests. And failing a test had a price. The price was violence, and it was handed out to almost everyone. Not just Joyce. The children were beaten. Robinson's girlfriend was beaten too, tied down on the same exercise bench in the kitchen that Joyce would later be strapped to. Sometimes it was a belt, sometimes it was a police baton. The weapon changed. The outcome didn't. Nobody in that house knew, from one day to the next, what kind of day it would be. A quiet one, or a violent one. There was no way to tell in advance. You just had to wait, and hope, and get through it. That uncertainty is what Joyce Quaweay woke up to, every single morning, including her last one.
She called my phone, and she said that she can't take no more. She said that she was trying to leave him. Our men don't beat on us. We're not supposed to be beaten on.
Before she was anyone's girlfriend, before she was anyone's mother, Joyce Quaweay was a girl from Providence, Rhode Island. Born March 30th, 1992, to George and Jackie Quaweay. Her mother had come to America from Liberia. The family were Black Hebrew Israelites. Faith mattered to them. So did family. One of Joyce's cousins would later say it plainly. In their culture, men don't put their hands on women. While still in high school, Joyce moved to Philadelphia to help her aunt. She finished growing up there, went to West Philadelphia High School, met Karen Nettles Davis, a friend who stayed close for life. As an adult, she found work at Spin Inc., caring for people with autism and intellectual disabilities. Her sister Beatrice remembered her as smart, strong, independent, always there for her kids. By 2016, Joyce was a mother of two. Leah was 2 years old. Dinah was 10 months. To everyone who loved her, Joyce looked like a woman building something, a career, a family, a future for her girls. Behind closed doors, though, was a different story. And it makes you wonder, how well do you really know what's happening in your sister's life? Your best friends? Now remember what Joyce's cousin said. He said Joyce had been trying to leave the relationship, trying to get out. Nobody else in the family said this. Her sister didn't know it. Her best friend didn't know it. But her cousin believed it was true. And if it was true, then maybe Joyce already sensed something the others didn't. That this relationship wasn't just difficult, it was dangerous. But on the morning of July 29, 2016, none of that mattered anymore. Police say Aaron Wright had gotten frustrated with Joyce. It wasn't over one big fight, it was smaller than that. In his eyes, Joyce wasn't submitting to him the way he expected her to. And remember, in that house, breaking a rule meant punishment. This time, the rule Wright believed Joyce had broken was obedience itself. So Wright decided to punish her. He and Robinson stripped Joyce naked. They handcuffed her wrists. They tied her ankles. Then they bent her over the weight bench in the kitchen, face down, and held her there. Then they beat her with a police baton. And they didn't stop after one hit or two. They kept going for hours. At some point that morning, a woman named Teresa arrived at the house. She was Wright's ex-girlfriend and the mother of his 2 older daughters. She had come to pick up her girls. Instead, she walked in on the beating. She would later testify about something she heard. She heard Wright ask Joyce a question. "Why are you going through this?" And Joyce answered him. She said, "Because I don't listen. I'm wicked." Think about that for a second. That's what Joyce said about herself, while she was being beaten half to death. The beating still didn't stop. At one point, Wright picked up a pair of scissors. He cut off pieces of Joyce's hair. Then he had one of the children put the hair into a plastic bag. At some point, Joyce told them she couldn't breathe, so Wright poured water on her face, not to help her breathe, just so he could keep going. Eventually, Joyce stopped talking. Then, she stopped moving completely. Wright and Robinson took her off the bench. They laid her on the kitchen floor. They tried to perform CPR. Wright told Teresa to call 911. When the 911 call came in, paramedics and firefighters rushed to the house on Green Street. They found Joyce on the kitchen floor, not breathing. They immediately started CPR, trying everything they could to bring her back. While they worked on her, a fire department lieutenant turned to Wright and asked him a question. He asked if Joyce had been using drugs. That's usually the first thing you ask when a young, healthy woman is suddenly unconscious like this. But Wright didn't lie. He told the lieutenant the truth, right there on the spot. He said, "I'm not gonna lie, I was beating her, and she went unconscious." Meanwhile, the medics kept working. They tried for several minutes. But Joyce wasn't responding. She wasn't waking up. By the time police officers arrived, they found Aaron Wright sitting on the front steps, just sitting there. As the officers walked toward him, he stood up, and he said 5 words. "I'm the one you want." He didn't run. He didn't fight. He was taken into custody without any trouble at all. Marquis Robinson didn't wait around. Before police even reached the house, he was gone. He fled the scene. It wasn't until later that he turned himself in, and once he did, Temple University didn't waste any time. Within days, Robinson was fired from the police force he'd served on for a decade, and Joyce never did wake up. She was pronounced dead right there at the scene, at 11:02 that morning. After Joyce died, investigators needed to prove exactly what had happened inside that house, and a lot of that proof came from 2 places. The first was her body. The second was a child. Let's start with what the medical examiner found. His name was Albert Chu, the city's deputy chief medical examiner. When he examined Joyce, he counted more than 50 separate bruises on her body, all in a similar pattern, straight lines, side by side. The kind of bruising you get from being hit, over and over, with something hard and cylindrical, like a police baton. He also found marks on her wrists and ankles, consistent with being handcuffed and tied down. His conclusion was clear. Dr. Chu ruled that Joyce didn't die from a heart problem. He said she died of sudden cardiac death. caused by physical assault. In other words, her body had been through prolonged, repeated trauma, and that trauma caused her heart to stop. Now, here's the thing. Wright and Robinson's lawyers tried a different explanation in court. They argued that Joyce actually died of natural heart failure, not from the beating itself. The medical examiner's testimony is what stood in the way of that argument, and in the end, it held up. During the trial, one prosecutor described that house on Green Street in a way that stuck with a lot of people. She called it a diabolical torture chamber. But maybe the most important testimony in the entire case didn't come from a doctor or a police officer. It came from a child, the same girl who had walked in on Joyce's beating that morning and gone to get herself a bowl of cereal. She testified about what she saw that day, but then she testified about something else, something that happened to her, not just something she witnessed. She told the court about a day when her younger sister had packed a tablet in the wrong bag. That's it. That was the mistake. But in that house, even a small mistake like that had consequences. She said Wright and Robinson made her lie face down on the same weight bench Joyce would later be beaten on. They handcuffed her, and then the two men took turns hitting her with a belt. She testified that each of them hit her more than 20 times. She still carries a scar from that day, on her thigh, a permanent mark from a punishment over a tablet in the wrong bag. And here's something else that came out during her testimony. She hadn't told anyone about it right away. It only came out weeks later, after her younger sister mentioned it to a family friend. That's what finally opened the door for the older girl to talk about what had been happening to her too. Her testimony did something important. It proved that Joyce's death wasn't an isolated moment of rage. It was part of a pattern that had already been happening to more than one person in that house, for longer than anyone outside those walls had known. In May of 2018, the trial reached its end. There was no jury. A judge alone decided the case, based on all the evidence. And the judge found both Aaron Wright and Marquis Robinson guilty. Guilty of third-degree murder. Guilty of aggravated assault, for what they'd done to that child. Guilty on multiple other charges tied to everything that had happened in that house. After the guilty verdict, it was time for sentencing. And this is where the court got to hear directly from the people who loved Joyce the most. Her mother, Jackie, stood up and spoke. She told the court that she had visited Joyce and Wright's home just 2 weeks before her daughter was killed. She said she saw nothing wrong, nothing that would have told her what was really happening behind those walls. Then she looked directly at Wright, and she asked him a question. She said, "How can you be evil to take my daughter away from me?" Wright didn't answer her. He just put his head down. When it was Wright's turn to speak, he didn't seem to understand the weight of what he'd done. He referred to Joyce's death as her passing away, like it was something that just happened to her, instead of something he did to her. He even said he loved her. He said he loved women. The judge wasn't convinced. In fact, the judge used Wright's own words against him, because here was a man with no prior criminal record, a man with an education, a man who had worn a badge for over 20 years, a man who, of all people, should have known better. And still, after everything, he couldn't own what he'd done. So the judge decided to sentence him above the standard guidelines. Aaron Wright was sentenced to 60.5, up to 141 years in prison. Marquis Robinson was sentenced to 55, up to 130 years. Wright didn't accept that. He appealed his case, arguing two things. First, that there wasn't enough evidence to convict him. Second, that his sentence was too harsh. In September of 2020, a higher court reviewed his appeal, and it rejected both arguments. His conviction stood, his sentence stood, adjusted only slightly, to 60.5, up to 136 years. Aaron Wright and Marquis Robinson will likely spend the rest of their lives in prison. Joyce looked like a woman with a full life ahead of her, a job she loved, 2 daughters who adored her, a future still being built. Nobody saw this coming, not her sister, not her best friend, maybe not even Joyce, until it was too late. That's what stays with you, not just what happened in that house, how long it stayed hidden, how normal it became, even to an 8-year-old pouring herself a bowl of cereal. Joyce's daughters will grow up without her. But because one child chose to tell the truth, the world knows exactly who took their mother from them. So ask yourself, is there someone in your life right now whose life looks fine from the outside? Someone who might just need you to ask and actually listen. That question alone could save a life.